Hi, this is Allison Sheridan, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. I'm a big fan of organizing applications like mind maps and outlining applications. The big player in the outlining application space is Omni Outliner from the Omni Group. Omni Outliner is very capable and very polished, but it's also very expensive. They do have their Essentials application for the Mac, which does bring the price down, but when you buy it for the Mac and for iOS, it's a fairly expensive proposition. If your needs are more modest, you may find Cloud Outliner 2 from xWaveSoft a very capable option for you. Cloud Outliner 2 runs on the Mac, iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch. Cloud Outliner is available in the Mac App Store for $9.99. But it's also part of the Setapp application suite, and it has one restriction in there that I'll show you, but it might not be something that you need to worry about. You can also get it in the iOS App Store for $2.99 for the iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch. I'm going to start on the Mac to teach you how Cloud Outliner 2 works, and then we'll move over to iOS to explore the differences in the touch interface.